Let's go back in time to 1,000 years ago today in ancient times. The year is 1022 AD, the location. A small village somewhere in the mountains of what is today northern Thailand. Welcome to my channel. Join me as we time travel back to 1,000 years ago. To see how the Hmong people lived their daily lives in ancient times. Their traditional way of life was based on shifting agriculture, hunting, and gathering. They were animistic in their beliefs and respected the natural world around them. They lived in small villages consisting of several Hmong clans. Each clan was made up of several extended families who lived together in houses built over permanent raised wooden platforms. Hunting was typically done by men, and they used weapons such as bows and arrows and spears to hunt animals such as deer, wild boar, and monkeys. Traditional Hmong clothing consists of a long black shirt and trousers for men, and a long white shirt and a wraparound skirt for women. The Hmong language has many dialects and is written in a unique script that uses phonetic characters. Literacy rates among the Hmong people are relatively low, but this has not prevented them from maintaining their language and cultural traditions. Their traditional way of life has been shaped by their environment and their interactions with other cultures. Today, the Hmong people are still living in the mountains of northern Thailand and other parts of Southeast Asia. They have been able to maintain much of their traditional way of life despite the changes and challenges of modern times. The Hmong people are known for their distinctive clothing, their unique silverwork, and their rich oral and performing arts traditions. They also have a complex belief system that combines animism, shamanism, and other indigenous beliefs. The Hmong people have a long history, and their traditional way of life has been shaped by their environment and interactions with other cultures. Despite the challenges they've faced, they've been able to preserve their language, customs, and traditions and continue to thrive in modern times. Despite the challenges they have faced, the Hmong people have been able to preserve their language, customs, and traditions and continue to thrive in modern times. They had a deep connection to the natural world, and their animistic beliefs guided their daily lives. Through agriculture, hunting, and gathering, they sustained themselves and their communities. And their distinctive clothing and jewelry reflected their wealth and status. While the future held uncertainties, Hmong people were resilient and adaptable, and they were well equipped to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Hmong people also have a rich oral tradition, and they have a long history of storytelling. Stories are an important part of Hmong culture, and they often teach moral lessons or preserve historical events. The Hmong people typically perform their stories orally. They often use music and dance to enhance the storytelling experience. We've explored the daily lives of the Hmong people, their customs, beliefs, and traditions. They believe that the natural world is inhabited by spirits, and that these spirits can influence the lives of humans. Shamans are an integral part of Hmong religion, and they are responsible for communicating with the spirits on behalf of the community. Shamans are typically individuals who have undergone special training. They use their knowledge and skills to heal the sick, protect the community from evil spirits, and bring good fortune to the Hmong people. The Hmong people also believe in an afterlife, and they have a variety of beliefs and practices related to death and the dead. They typically bury their dead, and they may also hold elaborate funeral ceremonies to honor the deceased. Hmong jewelry is typically made of silver, and is often worn as a symbol of wealth and status. Some common pieces include necklaces, bracelets, earrings, and rings. The Hmong people also have a rich tradition of silverwork, which is highly prized among collectors. Silver items are often intricately designed and feature traditional Hmong motifs and symbols. Women and children were responsible for gathering fruits, vegetables, herbs, and other natural materials that could be used for food, medicine, or other purposes. Gathering was an important part of the Hmong diet, and it also provided them with a source of income, as they could sell their gathered products in local markets. These houses were round or rectangular and made of wood and bamboo. The most important part of any house was the roof, which was steeply pitched to shed water and protect the inhabitants from the elements. The walls and floors were made of bamboo, and the houses were usually decorated with intricate patterns and designs carved into the wood. In 1022 AD, the Hmong people had been living in the mountains of northern Thailand, Laos, China, and other parts of Southeast Asia for many centuries. The hearth was used for cooking, heating, and lighting, and it was also the focus for religious rituals and ceremonies. The Hmong people were a patrilineal society, which meant that lineage and descent were traced through the male line. Men were typically the heads of households, while women were responsible for domestic duties such as cooking, cleaning, and child rearing. However, women also had a significant role in the religious and social life of the community. They were responsible for communicating with the spirits and performing rituals to ensure the health and well-being of the community. Each family within a clan had its own hearth, which was the center of domestic life. They also kept livestock, including pigs, chickens, goats, and buffalo. Agriculture was a communal activity, and the fields were often worked on by members of different clans in the village. The Hmong people used a technique known as swidden or slash-and-burn agriculture. This involved cutting down trees and vegetation, burning them, and then growing crops on the ashes. After a few years, the soil would become depleted, and the farmers would move to a new area and start again. This system allowed the Hmong people to make use of the natural resources available to them in the mountains. But it also had an impact on the environment. The practice of slash-and-burn agriculture can have negative consequences for the environment, such as deforestation and soil erosion. However, the Hmong people also had a deep respect for the natural world, and they implemented sustainable practices to ensure the long-term health of their environment. For example, they often planted fruit and vegetable seeds in the forest clearings, and they avoided overhunting, so that the animals could reproduce. The Hmong people were primarily an agricultural society. They grew crops such as rice, maize, sugarcane, bananas, and vegetables. In addition to agriculture, the Hmong people also engaged in hunting and gathering. The Hmong people are known for their distinctive clothing and jewelry, which is often made from natural materials such as hemp, indigo, beads, and silver. The Hmong people speak the Hmong language, which belongs to the Hmong language family. The Hmong people have a complex belief system that combines animism, shamanism, and other indigenous beliefs. The Hmong people have a rich history and culture that dates back centuries. 1,000 years ago, if you were born into one of these villages, you would have to wear a special outfit every day that was dictated by your social class. There would be no jobs in your village for miles around, so everyone would need to grow their own food, and the leader of your village would probably be a shaman. Back then, the region was known as Muong, which means something along the lines of our country or our land. Welcome to the channel. Today we are going to go back 1,000 years in history and find out what life was like for the Hmong people in Laos. Back 1,000 years ago, the lands that are now Laos and the other countries of the modern Indo-Chinese peninsula were all part of the kingdom of Lane Shang. The answer is, they banded together in villages with other ethnic groups from the region and followed the laws set forth by the local lord or chief. Because of this, the king always had enough food to feed a large standing army. Soldiers were drafted from all of the local ethnic groups. See, Lanazang was constantly fighting with their neighbors to the north and west, warring tribes known as the Tai Kadai. Most of the battles took place near the borders of the kingdom, but if the fighting got too intense, then yes, the Hmong would have been called upon to help defend the kingdom. This may have included weapons, tools, ornaments, and most importantly, food. Losing your head was also a fairly common occurrence. However, back 1,000 years ago, this was not the case. They were farmers who lived in villages and followed the laws of the local chief. Their entire way of life was dictated by their environment. Because of the terrain, they couldn't farm large swaths of land, so they used shifting cultivation instead. This meant that they never really owned any land, since it was seen as a communal resource. Their lifestyle was much different from the other ethnic groups of the region. For example, they were known for being excellent archers and preferred to use hit-and-run tactics in battle rather than engaging in open combat. That's because the Hmong believed that an enemy warrior's head contained the essence of their strength. By taking it, they believed that they could absorb some of that strength for themselves. They would either leave the bodies of their enemies on the battlefield or throw them down a cliff. If the chief of the region was ever to fall in battle, another would replace him until the king was defeated or the invaders were pushed back. These leaders had been appointed by the king of Lane Shang and enforced things like taxes, infrastructure projects, and military conscription. And remember to comment below with your ideas of what we should cover in future episodes. Now go and get 'em, Tiger. The last kingdom of the Khmer people 1,000 years ago. What life was like in Japan 1,000 years ago. What life was like in Rome 1,000 years ago. Every so often, the king would even visit the region to check in on his subjects. He might come to collect taxes, check up on construction projects, or draft able-bodied men into the army. This means that it was ruled over by a king. As the kingdom grew, the king would delegate some of his power to local lords and chiefs, who would rule over small sections of the land, collect taxes, and draft soldiers for the king. In fact, they were known for being excellent archers. They would use longbows made from the wood of the kaupuan tree, which is also known as the banyan tree. Their arrows were made from bamboo, and their bows were so strong that they could shoot a man-sized target 200 paces away. Even though the Hmong were excellent archers, they preferred not to engage in direct confrontation. That's why you won't find many depictions of them in battle. Instead, they would try to avoid detection and pick off enemy soldiers from far away. One such chief ruled over a region in the mountains where the Hmong people lived. They would send a scout to the front line to observe the enemy, then retreat back to the village once they had enough information. The scout would then report back to the village leader, who would make a plan of attack. Then the whole village would sneak out in the middle of the night and hopefully ambush the enemy. It wasn't very likely that they'd be able to completely wipe out the enemy force, but they'd at least be able to cause casualties. This way, the Hmong wouldn't lose too many men in battle. As with many countries of this time period, Lane Shung's political structure would be classified as a monarchy. Nowadays, the Hmong are known for being expert hunters and gatherers, which is why they live primarily in mountainous regions. But 1,000 years ago, during the days of Lane Shung, this wasn't the case. In fact, the Hmong were farmers. Their lifestyle was not too different from any of the other ethnic groups at the time. They grew rice, maize, sugarcane, cotton, and vegetables, and raised livestock, including chickens, pigs, water buffalo, and goats. When I say that the Hmong were farmers, I don't mean that they farmed on large pieces of land. In fact, they didn't own any land at all. This is because of a custom that is still practiced among the Hmong today called Code Shiv, which loosely translates into shifting cultivation. This was a type of subsistence farming that allowed families to use a piece of land for 2 or 3 years before leaving it abandoned so the soil could rest. The thing is, though, that they never actually owned the land. It was seen as a communal resource belonging to everybody. This is why there would be no private jobs. If you needed a tailor, a carpenter, or a metal worker, you would travel to the nearest village and trade for these goods and services, since there were no jobs in your village. But how did this system work if the Hmong didn't own any land? Speaking of the army, let's talk about the military of Lanexang. The kingdom thrived due to its vast agricultural lands. Now, this doesn't mean that the Hmong would have been sent off to fight in faraway lands. Now, just because the Hmong were farmers, that doesn't mean that they weren't prepared for war. One way that they would do this was by building watchtowers. If they were to win an engagement, the Hmong would have taken whatever spoils they could carry. In more recent times, we know that the Hmong people migrated to higher elevations in the mountains of Laos and became known as expert hunters and gatherers. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already.